With the release of the DLC, my next few videos, excluding collaborations, will be mainly focused on Elden Ring, which has been one of my favorite verses of all time ever since I started to dive into the lore. Today's topic will be a ranking of all 16 Remembrance bosses from the base game based off of their overall capabilities in the lore. My main motivation for this video specifically is because, to put it bluntly, I think most of the tier lists for the verse I've seen on this platform suck. Now my list is both more comprehensive and fact-based, as well as having less to do with my own personal biases. I'll be taking all these characters at their prime, excluding a special case I'll be talking about later down the line. There will be some spoilers down the line, so if you don't wish to be spoiled on the ending of the DLC, I would suggest refraining to watch this video until a later time. Off the bat, number 16, we have the Regal Ancestor Spirit. The reason for this being as it is featless, with nothing really connecting it to any line of scaling either, which is why I can't really put it any higher than this without headcanon or assumptions. Number 15 is of course going to be Godric the Golden, the ruler of Stormvale. Now, I don't think he's as weak as many claim, but realistically, he's not getting much higher than this. His feats consist of killing a dragon, losing to Melania, and being able to get his hands on a Great Rune, which would have required him to survive raiding Lanedale near the beginning of the Shattering, which is no small feat. Him having the Great Rune is impressive on its own, as well due to the fact that Great Runes canonically boost the holder's power, meaning Godric is quite powerful in his own right, having also upscaled anyone who dared to attack Stormvale before the events of the game. Now, losing to Melania may not seem like a feat, but this is ironically quite an impressive durability/endurance feat for someone of this level, as to have Bennett humiliated in direct battle with her and begging for mercy, he would have ironically had to have taken at least one of her attacks. At number 14 would be the last Fire Giant, barely edging out over Godric. The Fire Giant pretty much just takes us through having far superior power output, seeing as it can cause massive avalanches with just roaring, as well as using the Fell God's Flames, which can burn the Erd Tree itself as well as abstract entities. It doesn't have much going for it in other stats, which is why it's barely over Godric, and I honestly wouldn't have a problem if you believe these placements to be switched. At number 13, I have Rykard, who has potential to be much higher, but with the limited context for one of his more important accolades, it limits how high I can place him. Rykard can manipulate souls and has precognition, which are a nice couple of abilities, but what are his offensive capabilities? Rykard can unleash power rivaling that of a volcanic eruption and has consumed countless heroes since becoming one with the Serpent. Paired with all of this, and the main reason I place him this high is due to his apparent immortality, with this even being showcased to use in multiple ways, such as Rykard seemingly being alive even after we defeat him with a large chunk of his head missing as well as being decapitated. We see this again in the Blasphemous Blade, which appears to have the warriors he consumed continue to move around even as mutilated chunks of meat. The previously mentioned accolade that could theoretically place him much higher is a statement of possibly being capable of fighting Malekith according to Ranni. This doesn't have much context and could have alternate interpretations, such as him being eventually able to challenge Malekith after growing in power for who knows how long. He also needs an item that parries Destined Death to do this, but the main thing that drags him down is the lack of real context. He has a Great Rune as well. Number 12 would have to be Mohg now. This is actually much higher than I originally had Mohg, but after desperately looking for any actual scaling for him, I found something to get him decently high here. He upscales Vare to a rather insane degree, which may not seem super impressive until you actually think about how strong Vare is. He's one of the few characters in the entire game that can actually canonically damage the player Tarnish, outside of just a gameplay perspective, meaning that Vare is actually really strong. He gets outshined by Eleonora, though, as Zero states that she is the deadliest of all the Bloody Fingers. It goes even further, though, as Okina should upscale Eleonora as he rose to a higher plane of power, which at bare minimum put him above all the other prominent individuals who come from the Land of Reeds. Mohg upscaling Okina through their fight, in which Mohg tanks Okina's attack and easily recruits him. Mohg should upscale all of the Bloody Fingers anyways, due to their power coming from him in the first place, which is my main reason for Mohg being this high. He also pierced the flesh of the Formless Mother, but as she is featless physically, with little to go off of, I generally dismiss this feat. Mohg can also manipulate blood and blood flame, which once in contact with someone will continue to burn away at them, even after losing contact. He also has a Great Rune similarly to Rykard and Godric. Number 11 is the Natural Born of the Void and the Star of Darkness, Astel. A malformed star born in the lightless void, Astel has some great feats in his pocket that place him leagues above the rest of the characters mentioned so far. He's made up of star debris, as is said before, and a literal star. With him using attacks which are dozens if not hundreds of stars on their own, he can also cause destruction comparable to that of an actual black hole, and can literally destroy the night sky as seen with the Eternal City. He can also create portals to space and teleport at will. Number 10 may come as a surprise to all but the 50-ish viewers of my Morgoth vs. Radahn video, but this position belongs to the Star Scourge himself. Radahn earns this position through his feat of grabbing hold of all the stars in the sky and having his magic be capable of holding them for decades if not much longer. many of these stars likely being Estelles. As explained in my earlier video, I debunked many of the statements for Radahn being the strongest demigod, but since then I rediscovered another one. This statement is again lackluster, seeing as it's based off of a popular opinion in the verse instead of from a factual position. Back to his actual scaling though, Radahn can use his gravity magic to infuse his weapons and even fly or use it as telekinesis. He can also stalemate a fatigued Malenia for a length of time, forcing her to use the Scarlet Aeonia. He also has a great rune like the previous Shard Barriers, of course. Radahn is the special case from the introduction, actually, with his recent appearance in the DLC leading many to believe this to scale to the original Radahn in his prime. But this is a different physical body and very likely amped by Miquella in his new deific state. His great rune is unique in the fact that it can burn away Malenia's Scarlet Rot though, although that isn't much help as far as this ranking goes. My 9th placement belongs to the Lich Dragon Fortisax, Godwyn's loyal friend until the very end. Ironically enough, I believe Fortisax is actually at his pinnacle of power by the time we fight him, with his arsenal expanding to use Blight based from an actual occurrence of Destined Death. He utilizes it in his lightning, and even causes the Blight gas, meaning he can absolutely trigger Blight in many of the characters on this list. Fortisax is renowned as the strongest Boulder Stone, likely meaning the strongest dragon present during the war, placing him above Grand Sax. Now, Grand Sax is actually rather impressive himself, having broken the defenses of Leyndell, which nobody in the history of Elden Ring aside from him has done. Radahn would have had to attempt this with him invading Leyndell to obtain a Great Rune, and yet he failed, meaning Grand Sax is likely physically superior to Radahn, with Fortisax, at least with his twin lightning spears, having superior attack potency to even that. So Fortisax is capable of blighting most of his list, as well as having the attack potency to rank this high. His endurance is also among the highest in the game, having survived decades if not much longer, being infected with Destined Death and continuing to live on. At number 8 comes the last of all kings, Morgott the Omen King. Viewers of my last Elden Ring related video know why I have Morgott this high, but I'll sum it up in a more concise way here. The one who defeats Radahn in the opening cutscene to the game would be Margit instead of Morgott due to the condition of his weapon and the area that battle takes place at, as Morgott does not leave the foot of the Erd Tree and does not brandish his sword as Margit, while doing such in his actual body. Morgott is also a horror to anyone with ambition to the Erd Tree or Elden Throne, meaning that Radahn would be terrified of Morgott. He had ambition for the Erd Tree to claim a Great Rune, and furthermore in the DLC we're shown that Radahn actually did have ambition for the throne. I'll explain why this isn't entirely Miquella playing Griffith in the comments to anyone questioning Radahn's motives. By the time of the second events of Leyndell, which would have been one of the later battles of Shattering, the Erd Tree still stands as completely unshaken, meaning nobody has been capable of breaking Leyndell's defenses, which in the case of keeping out demigods like Radahn, Morgott and Margit would be the most crucial pieces. Morgott is also the only boss in the entire game that you both have to refrain from fighting immediately, and are told directly that you aren't ready for that smoke yet. And this is while you have access to multiple of the already mentioned characters. You need 2 Great Runes to access Leyndell to fight him, with Great Runes being a massive amp as stated earlier. He also gains Blood Flame in his second phase similarly to his twin Mohg, and has a Great Rune. Coming in at our number 7 place is Renala of the Full Moon, who is the character on here getting carried the most by the conditions of this video being Prime. As we see her in the first phase of her fight, now she's weak and honestly just a complete fodder, but back on her heyday she's absolutely deserving of this placement. She can create entire universes as we're shown when Ranni recreates Prime Renala, and has access to all glintstone sorcery aside from the ones that were made after the Shattering, like Top's Barrier. She was also capable of going toe-to-toe with an early Radagon who is no slouch himself, having perfected Golden Order incantations better than anyone in the entire verse, aside from the Elden Beast and Miquella. Radagon, sharing a body with Marika, also would have had to have the physical strength required to shatter the Elden Ring, which is a very impressive feat. So Renala's stalemating of Radagon is enough to really cement her position here, even if it isn't quite Prime Radagon level. At number 6, we have the strongest demigod, Malenia, Blade of Miquella. Yeah, no, Radahn is not relative or equal to her like at all, and is even further off when Malenia reaches her goddess state. Malenia was confirmed fatigued in her battle against Radahn, and it was still a stalemate until she bloomed. So fatigued Malenia is just straight up relative to Radahn. She later ascends to godhood in the fight against the Tarnished, which should narratively be a massive amp. In this state, she can also spam Scarlet Aeonias, which are pretty much impossible to counter for anyone lower than her to counter in any way, and is damn near just a win con on its own. She is stated to have unparalleled strength and is one of the most skilled combatants in the verse, with a Great Rune on top of all of this. I simply don't see how anyone below her on this list is capable of winning on a consistent basis. Breaking the top 5 is Dragonlord Placidusax. He has a single best crossover feat in the verse, with being implied to have created the Chasm of Time, as his scales even individually warp space-time. Anyone familiar with scaling and Elden Ring knows why this is incredibly impressive as far as the verse goes. He should also upscale beyond Fortisax and the other ancient dragons due to being Elden Lord, which, as Godfrey tells us, was once warranted with strength, implying that the Elden Lord was generally one of, if not the strongest around. As confirmed in the DLC, Godfrey indeed did not fight Placidusax. His injuries originate elsewhere. Depending on how you interpret the timeline, you could also make the assumption that in his prime, Placidusax would bear the Elden Ring, but as far as the first few events in the timeline go, it's a little hard to tell, and I don't feel like going into all that. He could also turn into a cloud, which is pretty cool, I guess. At number 4, we have the Elden Beast, which is not to downplay the whale in any way. It just simply cannot go any higher. The Elden Beast is the concept of order and the leading vassal of the Greater Will, meaning it has some very impressive narrative implications. It also sealed base America and Radagon, meaning it upscales beyond them, and in turn Prime Nala and people of her level. It has pretty much any and all incantations, as it's the source of them, and it shows a wide variety of them that even characters like Radagon could use. It has the ability to transmutate matter as well. As the Elden Beast is also the Elden Ring, it goes without saying that a Prime Elden Beast has all the great runes, including the Rune of Death, which is just insane and I believe easily places it above everyone mentioned so far. Godfrey, the second Elden Lord, takes the number 3 spot here, not really due to any of his feats, as they're all on the lower end and don't make it any higher than like right around Fortisax when paired with his narrative above Radahn. But what makes him place this high is that due to the fact that in his prime as Elden Lord, he would brandish the Elden Ring, meaning he literally just has the Elden Beast and all its power in his own arsenal. Not really the most impressive method of being top 3, but you can't really deny that to him with that alone, since he has all of what number 4 has as well as his own shit. Second place belongs to Radagon for a very similar reason, except that unlike Godfrey, he's very strong on his own as well. As I explained before, Radagon should have the AP even before having the Elden Ring to break the Elden Ring, and can therefore at least damage the Elden Beast, which I don't see base Godfrey doing. Radagon also has a much larger arsenal with a very significant variety, as Radagon is one of the best users of incantations as well as sorceries after the Leonardian Wars, meaning Radagon has one of the best arsenals in the entire game as a whole. The top spot on this list belongs to the Death of the Demigods in the Shadow of Marika, Malekith the Black Blade. He alone on this list makes it to the very top of the tier list, even including non-remembrance characters, and I personally have him as the strongest character in the entire verse excluding the Players Tarnished and the Outer Gods. As said before, he gained renown as the Death of the Demigods, and all of them feared him, which include characters like Ranni, Mikola, and Melania, who are all in the top 10 of the entire verse for me. His ability of Destined Death literally makes him capable of blighting essentially anyone immediately, even if they're immortal, as Destined Death kills the soul as well. He has inverse over the number 2 placement as well, with him being banished by Marika before she shatters the Elden Ring, which we can infer is due to his role as her shadow, since when she broke the Elden Ring, he would, similarly to Blythe, chase her down and kill her, which in Malekith's case I believe is entirely plausible. So Malekith should be directly stronger than Elden Ring Radagon. My explanation of Destined Death before is even downplaying it. Destined Death would mean the literal concept of death itself, meaning its direct use would result in conceptual death, which, warning, I'm going into slight headcanon territory with this, could be the reason that aside from the omniscient narrator behind item descriptions and such, the Gloam-Eyed Queen is never expanded upon by literally anyone else in the verse, because conceptually she was just straight up erased from existence. There's likely flaws in that belief, but it's just something small to think about. So yeah, that's my tier list. I'll explain pretty much anything to those with questions in the comments, and my friend is currently editing the Godzilla vs. Gojo video, so that'll drop whenever he finishes that. Hope I was comprehensive enough for all of you to understand my points and maybe even agree with me. See you all next time and have a great rest of your day.